Gina and her husband Charlie Davenport are quite happy in their marriage. On her way to meet with the marketers, Gina called her twin sister, Lenny Beck, but reached voicemail. Gina asked the sister to call back. At the advertising agency's office, the marketing team was already gathered, waiting for Gina. They were supposed to choose a cover for the book commissioned by the publisher. None of the options suited Gina because she wanted more chaos. All in all, Gina has a busy life. Now she is worried about the fact that her sister has been out of touch for 36 hours. Her husband Jack wasn't answering his phone either. Charlie thought there was no reason to worry, perhaps Lenny and Jack were just busy. The couple noticed that the front door to their house was slightly ajar. Inside they found a mess caused by raccoons that had broken in. Charlie asked his wife why she had so many maps of Lake Tahoe since she hated hiking. Gina replied that she wanted to make a gift for Lenny and Jack. Suddenly Jack called back, saying that Lenny was missing. Apparently, someone had broken into their stable. The police were already at their house and assumed it was a kidnapping. Gina flew home on the next available flight. The sisters have always been very close, and Gina was determined to do everything to find Lenny. Upon arriving in Mount Echo, Gina saw posters about Lenny's disappearance all over town. The first thing Gina did was go to their farm. A team of forensic experts was working there. Many journalists and onlookers had also gathered. Learning from the neighbors that Maggie, Lenny's best friend, wasn't here, Gina was very surprised. Jack and the sisters' father had gone into the mountains with the search team. Maddie, Lenny and Jack's daughter, was being looked after by Natasha, the nanny who had been working for them for several months. Gina hadn't known about this. She wanted to see her niece right away, who was sound asleep at the time. Looking at the girl, Gina saw Lenny in her. When Maddie woke up, she first thought it was Mom in front of her. Gina promised the niece that they would find her mother soon. The search team returned empty-handed. Jack had no idea what had happened to his wife. He and Gina have always had a strained relationship, but now they must stand united. The last thing Lenny said in a phone conversation with her sister was about a new colt, and that was a week ago. But Jack claimed that it had been a month since then. Sheriff Louise Floss and her deputy, Paula Martinez, stated that the search would resume tomorrow since it would soon be dark. The bolts from the stable had been broken, the gates left open, the horses let out, and the office in the stable had been turned upside down. There were also traces of men's boots found. Lenny's stallion, Prince, was also missing. All of this looks like a kidnapping, but the police aren't ready to confirm it yet. Sheriff Floss thinks that it's hard for Gina to be here because of shadows from the past, but right now Gina is focused solely on her sister's disappearance. She believes the police aren't doing enough. As night fell and the police were getting ready to leave, Louise told Paula that this family had always been marked by sadness. On the road, they spotted a suspicious man who clearly wasn't part of the search team. Gina left a voicemail for Meg, Lenny's best friend. Gina feels that something terrible has happened and doesn't understand why Meg didn't participate in the search. The father and daughter wish their reunion hadn't happened under such circumstances. During dinner, Victor McCleary announced that he would head out again on the search tomorrow. Another sister, Claudia, mentioned that the doctor hadn't recommended it. Gina realized that the father was hiding something from her about his health, but he changed the subject. Claudia and Gina never got along, but Victor urged his daughters to forget past disagreements, as they now had a common goal. However, Claudia, who uses a wheelchair, wasn't ready to let go of all the negativity between them. Everything in this house reminded Gina of the past. Many years ago, the sisters' mother, Maria, fell seriously ill. She gave the twin sisters bracelets, saying it would be a symbol of their eternal connection. The past continues to haunt Gina. Seeing her torn doll, her favorite childhood toy, Gina blamed Claudia, even though it was obvious she was physically incapable of doing it. Gina no longer wanted to stay in the house and planned to check into a hotel. In the car, she called her husband and told him about the torn doll. It seemed like a message. Perhaps the nanny had done it. It also seemed suspicious that Lenny and Meg had a falling out. For some reason, Lenny didn't tell her sister about it. As a therapist, Charlie advised his wife to get a good night's sleep. In the yard, Gina found another piece of the doll, along with Lenny's bracelet. This really did seem like a sinister message. Gina recalls the day of their mother's funeral. The sisters took the loss very hard. At the hotel, Gina recorded voice messages for Lenny, begging her to come back safe and sound. The uncertainty was driving Gina mad. Lenny used to keep an online journal, and Gina began to review her entries. But could Lenny have been hiding something? As Gina was about to take a bath, she felt bad. The past still wouldn't let her go. The next morning, the search resumed under the leadership of Sheriff Floss. Suddenly Lenny's horse, Prince, came running but without a rider. During the search in the woods, Gina asked Jack if there had been problems in his and Lenny's marriage. Their conversation was interrupted by a shout from someone on the search team, who had found one of the Beck's horses lifeless. It appeared that someone had shot it. What was strange was that the horse's chip had been removed, and it seemed it had been done a while ago. Jack had no idea why anyone would need to do that. Gina whispered to her father, asking what was going on. Victor replied that now was not the time for this conversation. Sheriff Floss wanted to ask Gina some questions. The police didn't believe Jack was involved in Lenny's disappearance. There were two theories: either it was a kidnapping, or Lenny simply ran away. The question was, from what? Gina had no answer. Jack was on the phone with someone, saying he couldn't backdate the paperwork for the stable for the sheriff. Gina's arrival made him end the conversation. Jack was annoyed that his wife's sister suspected him of something. Hugging Jack, Gina said that she would always be on his and Lenny's side. He admitted that it was hard for him to look at an exact replica of his wife. The day before her disappearance, Lenny told the sister that she was tired of working 12 hours a day. But according to Jack, that wasn't true. Lenny came and went whenever she wanted. He even had to hire a nanny because all the responsibilities fell on him. Gina thought about the day of the funeral when she and her sister ran away. They promised to always take care of each other. Maddie confessed to her aunt that Mom had often been away recently, but this was the first time she'd been gone for so long. The girl thinks her mom is no longer alive. But Gina knows that's not true. As twins, she and Lenny share a special bond. If Lenny had perished, Gina would have felt it. Now she wants to understand what secrets Lenny had been hiding. Charlie called, asking if there was any news. Unfortunately, Gina had nothing good to say yet. Something strange was clearly going on. Charlie was going to get a plane ticket and come to his wife, but she asked him to give her one more day. Feeling exhausted, Gina decided to take a nap. She was haunted by nightmares from the past. She and Lenny used to love switching places. Thanks to their identical appearance, no one ever noticed the trick. At night, Jack mistook Lenny for Gina and kissed her. Gina asked him to stop. Jack in turn apologized, saying that she shouldn't be here. Tortured by the uncertainty, Gina went into the woods with a flashlight, calling for her sister. In a mountain cave she found another doll. In the past, the sisters had hidden here when they ran away from the funeral. Gina also found Lenny's belongings there, recalling how she and her sister often switched places. In a book, Gina found a message that said she now gets to live both lives. And Gina must choose. Every year the sisters switched lives, and no one noticed the swap. In the present, Gina dressed in Lenny's clothes and picking up a large rock, knocked herself out in the woods. The next morning, the woman as Lenny made her way home. She hadn't played this role in a year. Seeing her mother through the window, Maddie ran into her arms. Jack didn't know how to react. The woman became Lenny again, became herself to figure out what the sister had set up here. Thanks to their similar looks, the sisters had been deceiving those around them their entire lives. Every birthday they swapped places. The last time they did this was in Paris a year ago. Lenny took Gina's place, living her life. Now Lenny understands that Gina wasn't lost but simply didn't want to be found. Until Lenny finds her sister, she'll have to play both roles. Lenny told the family members that Gina was tired and went to the hotel. Lenny also told the sheriff that 3 burglars in ski masks had broken into the stable. But Floss found it strange that the mysterious burglars had released most of the horses instead of stealing them. Lenny allegedly chased the burglars on her horse, Prince. At some point the horse got spooked and threw her off. She was unconscious for a long time. After taking the statement, the sheriff promised to find the culprits, though there were many inconsistencies in Lenny's story. Floss couldn't help but notice this. Lenny tries to understand why her sister ran away, as they had always been one whole. Nothing would ever come between them, not even Jack. In the past, both twins had been attracted to the young handsome Jack. He couldn't even tell them apart. In the present, Jack told his wife that based on the tracks in the woods, it wasn't a chase. Jack wants Lenny to tell him the truth because the police will eventually find everything out. Lenny denied everything. But Jack knew for sure that his wife was hiding something from him. But what reasons does she have to lie to the family? To cool the husband's temper, Lenny began speaking more gently, reminding him that they had to stick together, no matter what. In reality though, Lenny couldn't stop thinking about why her sister ran away. When Lenny drove the daughter to school, the girl asked the mother to grab her old flip phone from the glove compartment. But it wasn't there, though it was supposed to be. Seeing Maggie, Lenny approached her, but the former best friend was clearly not in the mood to talk. Lenny has no idea what happened between Gina and Meg, but she promised to make it up to her. Now Lenny must figure out why Meg is so angry with her and what phone Maddie was talking about. For answers, Lenny went to the electronics store. The sales clerk, Cal, recognized the woman who had been shown on TV and who had previously bought a phone from him. Lenny hoped she could transfer the data from the old SIM card. Cal said he could print out the data for the past month. Apparently, the phone hadn't been used for 3 days. Outside, Paula approached Lenny and reminded her about the fire in the church that happened years ago. For some reason, Sheriff Floss thinks this may be connected to the current case. Learning that Gina had been looking for information about that fire, Lenny wondered why her sister needed it. A strange message came through on the phone. When Lenny called the number, she learned that Gina had been dealing substances. The buyer set up a meeting for today. Finding ketamine in the medicine cabinet, Lenny lied to the father, saying the local veterinarian had asked her to bring the medication due to delivery problems. Victor sensed that something was bothering his daughter. She said it was because of financial problems in the family. But Victor knew the daughter was lying because the veterinarian she mentioned had stopped practicing a year ago. Tomorrow is the sister's birthday, and Victor wants them both to come to dinner. They usually celebrate just the two of them, but it's important to Victor that the family gathers together this time. Lenny has no idea what the sister got her involved in. She doesn't know how much longer she can play this role. At the arranged meeting place, she handed the ketamine to the buyers, 2 young people. Lying that she had lost all her old contacts, Lenny demanded the young people tell her who connected them with her. They mentioned a man with a red pickup truck. Later, Lenny called that man's number and arranged to meet him in half an hour. He did indeed arrive in a red pickup truck. Seeing him, Lenny realized that Gina had let Dylan James back into her life after all these years. Dylan thought she would have called back sooner. Lenny said she had lost her phone. Lenny intended to hand over the money from the clients to Dylan, the main dealer, but he said this wasn't the right place for it. As Lenny sat in the car with Dylan, she involuntarily plunged into the past. Dylan had been a bad boy, and that's what had attracted both girls to him. In the present, Dylan reminded Lenny of their plan. She was surprised to learn that he knew the sisters switched places every year. Now he thinks that Gina is in front of him, pretending to be Lenny. They arrived at a cabin in the woods. Dylan said they should run away together right now. But Lenny said she couldn't do that as long as Floss was watching her. It was obvious that Dylan and Gina had been romantically involved. Lenny played her role well. Dylan promised that everything would be fine. But suddenly Dylan grabbed Lenny, saying he knew right away that she wasn't Gina. Lenny said she was only trying to find her sister. In fact, no one knows where Gina is at this point. Now Lenny and Dylan have in common now is that they want to get to the bottom of things. Dylan really does love Gina. Lenny declared that her sister was ill. In college, she had her first psychotic episode. A failed pregnancy made it worse. The life switching was something Lenny did for her sister. Gina likely decided to run away from everyone, though Dylan doesn't believe that. He was going to drive Lenny back. Forgetting her bag in the cabin, Lenny returned and found a fake passport for Gina among Dylan's things under the name Kira Davis. It seemed they really had been planning to run away. Stealing Dylan's money and all the documents, Lenny left the cabin. Dylan had nearly ruined their lives once before, and Lenny couldn't let that happen again. Floss, who came to visit Gina at the hotel, hadn't expected to see Lenny instead. She pretended her sister was taking a bath. Floss insisted that she needed to speak to Gina right away. Lenny promised that the sister would stop by the police station on her way to the airport. When Charlie called, Lenny ignored the call. Once the sheriff finally left, Lenny disguised herself as Gina and called her husband back, saying she would be delayed a little longer because the sister needed her support right now. Charlie understood. Later as Gina, Lenny stopped by the police station. Floss wanted to know if Lenny had asked Gina for money. She assured the sheriff that the sister had never shared her financial troubles. But the sheriff knew there was something off about the whole story. Not wanting to answer any more questions, Lenny as politely as possible said she was running late for her flight. Lenny has a warm relationship with Claudia, which can't be said about Gina. In a moment of honesty, Claudia told the sister that she was soon planning to introduce her boyfriend to the family. Lenny continues living both lives. Today at the father's request, she must convince Gina to attend the dinner. And Gina really did attend. Their father wanted Gina to stay longer. But she was determined to leave. Claudia accused her sister of being selfish. Even though Lenny assured Gina never had secrets from her, in reality that's not true. Victor decided to confess that he was seriously ill. He has congestive heart failure. He hadn't told Lenny, knowing she and Jack were already dealing with too many problems. Today Victor wanted to tell both twins about his diagnosis. And before Victor leaves this world, he wants unity in the family. When the daughter promised to stay, he couldn't hold back his tears. The past haunts Lenny more and more. Before bed, Jack asked her where she had been. Lenny lied that she had fallen asleep at the hotel. Jack confessed to his wife that when he was a little drunk, he mistook Gina for her and kissed. Now he feels that Lenny has fallen out of love with him. Maybe he has fallen out of love with her too. Over the past year, they've grown distant from each other. Angry, Lenny declared she was going to the hotel to convince her sister to leave once and for all. Only then could they save their marriage. Lenny truly doesn't know what to do now. Gina in a single moment destroyed everything they had built over the years. The worst part is that Gina went back to Dylan James after everything he did. Lenny drove to the burned down church. The night of the fire is still fresh in her memory. Now Lenny hopes that Gina will come home, and they will fix everything together. For the first time, Lenny is celebrating her birthday without the twin sister. Unexpectedly, photos of the burned church appeared in Lenny's online journal. Then a message arrived: "I know everything. Let me go." Lenny doesn't understand why Gina wants to hurt her. Maybe it's Dylan's fault, who always tried to separate the sisters. If Gina runs away with him, there's nothing Lenny can do to help her. The sisters had had fights before. For example, Gina would always get angry if Lenny kept something secret from her. Lenny still hopes that Dylan will agree to cooperate. Together it will be easier for them to find Gina. Lenny misses her sister, and now she's scared. She would do anything for her twin. That night, Lenny was watching the videos in the online journal again, remembering how many years ago she and Gina had promised not to hide anything from each other. They agreed to keep a shared diary. Lenny made breakfast for her daughter and husband. But Jack was clearly not in the mood to eat. Maddie could sense the tension between the parents, even though they tried not to show it. Victor arrived, congratulating his daughter on her birthday. To mark the occasion, he planned to throw a big party where many of the town's residents would be present. Lenny said she doubted Gina would agree to come. But Victor was more optimistic. Lenny didn't like the nanny's presence in the house. Natasha was surprised by this, considering that over the past year, Lenny had hardly taken part in raising her daughter. Later that day, she met with Paula at a cafe and inquired about the unsolved case of the church fire. According to the sheriff's deputy, Floss had talked to Meg about it yesterday. Lenny was perplexed as to where the connection was here. In the car, she changed back into Gina, who favored a more daring style. Meg met with Lenny, thinking she was Gina. Meg said everything started when her cousin Dylan returned to town. Remembering how Lenny had threatened her, Meg cried. Like the sheriff, Dylan had been asking strange questions about the church fire. Meg couldn't remember much about the incident. Dylan had also asked how Claudia got hurt. Lenny resumed her true identity and went to the house of Georgia Tyler, Dylan's grandmother, who was clearly happy to see her after 10 years. Lenny was there to ask about Dylan. Mrs. Tyler said she'd been in touch with him again lately, but she didn't know exactly where he was right now. Seeing an old brown backpack on the couch in the living room, Lenny was involuntarily transported back to the past when they were all young. Lenny grew close to Jack, while Gina wanted to break free from their small town. Pretending to be Gina, Lenny left Charlie a voicemail saying she would be delayed for a few more days. At the same time, she received a call from the bank asking her to confirm a transfer of $60,000. Trying to remain calm, Lenny gave all the necessary details under her sister's name. She planned to head to the bank, but a call from Claudia, who asked the sister to pick up the birthday cake from the bakery, pushed back her plans. Lenny hadn't expected to see the sheriff in the bakery. It turned out that Victor had invited her to the party as well. Floss also had some news regarding the horse thieves. There were no leads yet, but Floss hinted to Lenny that she was aware of her financial troubles. Lenny realized she was suspected of fraud but chose not to pursue the subject. The cake was decorated with a family photo, but without Gina. This was Claudia's idea. However, Lenny doesn't have time for arguments. She rushed to the bank branch, but Dylan and Gina had beaten her there. The sisters' eyes met. Gina made it clear that she would not back down from her plan. They drove away in the red pickup truck. Even if Lenny wanted to, she couldn't catch them. Disguised as Gina, she entered the bank. The bank employee asked her if she had found her ID. Lenny asked to be given the money with a cashier's check. In the past, the sisters started fighting because Gina wanted more freedom. In a fit of anger, she left a scar on herself to no longer be an exact copy of the sister. While treating Gina's wound, Lenny said they were one and the same, and gave herself an identical scar. In the present, after tracking down Dylan, Lenny demanded to know where Gina was. He in turn demanded the money and fake documents back. Lenny tried to blackmail Dylan, guessing he was involved in horse theft. It was part of their plan with Gina. But Dylan didn't fall for the provocation, saying Gina didn't want to come back. When Jack saw his wife arguing with Dylan through the window, it made him suspicious. Lenny drove Dylan off her land. In the past, Gina began spending more and more time with Dylan, neglecting her sister. Lenny didn't care about Jack, she only cared about Gina. To make things fair, they switched places again. Jack didn't realize the switch. That evening, Jack accused his wife of infidelity. She assured him there was nothing between her and Dylan. Suddenly Lenny received a call from her sister, who was at the hotel. Since Jack was nearby, Lenny was talking to Gina in a friendly way. When Lenny came to the hotel room, she found a gift from Dylan on the bed, containing the sister's diary. At that moment she received a message from Gina, who was now at their birthday party. Fearing that Gina would tell their father the truth, Lenny joined the party. Everyone began congratulating her. Lenny found Gina in the backyard, talking to Jack. Before Lenny could do anything, Floss intervened, acting deliberately friendly. Lenny on the other hand tried to act as if nothing had happened. She was surprised when Charlie suddenly appeared, wanting to personally congratulate his wife on her birthday. Both couples chatted for a bit. It turned out that Charlie knew his wife had withdrawn $60,000 from their account, supposedly to pay off Lenny and her husband's loan. Jack had never heard about this before and couldn't hide his confusion. He was angry that the wife had taken money from her sister without his knowledge. Jack made a scene in front of all the guests and family members. He thought his wife had been deceiving the relatives to give the money to her lover. Maggie confirmed that Lenny and Dylan were having an affair. Lenny couldn't take it anymore and left the party. For the first time in a while, she spoke to her sister one-on-one. Now Gina just wants to disappear forever, but to do that, she needs money and fake documents. Lenny begged her to reconsider, but Gina remained firm. As blackmail, Gina used a copy of the electronic journal on a flash drive. It contained many interesting details about the church fire and what happened to Claudia. Floss would certainly be interested in looking at that. Gina was about to return to the house and blow out the candles on the birthday cake. The sheriff was curious to know what the sisters had been talking about. Lenny replied that they were simply discussing family matters. While Lenny was gone, Gina told their father that her sister had confirmed the affair with Dylan. Struggling to hold back his emotions, Victor told Lenny that marriage is more important than anything and that lies would destroy her life. If Lenny didn't break things off with Dylan, Victor would have to intervene. It was time to blow out the candles on the birthday cake. Gina whispered to her sister that if she didn't give them the money, she would lose everything. Meg was no longer angry with Lenny, but now it hardly mattered. Finally Claudia introduced the sister to her boyfriend, Beau. But Lenny didn't care about that now, as Gina had taken Maddie somewhere. Running outside, Lenny desperately called for her daughter. Hearing the mother's voice, the girl ran toward her. It turned out that Maddie had just gone to the highway to say goodbye to Aunt Gina, who was leaving in a taxi. Charlie also left the party, thinking his wife had gone to the hotel. Lenny doesn't want to believe that her sister is gone forever. Meanwhile, Charlie tracked the wife's location and found out she was heading in a completely different direction. Jack had no desire to go home after everything he had learned. Now Lenny no longer has to live two lives. Lenny expressed her gratitude to Claudia for always being there for her, no matter what. Gina's departure didn't upset Claudia at all. She planned to spend the day with her niece. Lenny asked the husband to give her a chance. He agreed, though his resentment toward the wife hadn't lessened. The forest road was closed off, and the area was cordoned by police. It was a crime scene where a charred pickup truck was found with a body inside. The sheriff believes it was Dylan James. Floss questioned the spouses, stating that Dylan's demise could be a warning to them in light of recent events. Dylan didn't die from the fire but from deep wounds. Floss's attention was drawn to the bruise on Jack's forehead. He said that one of the mares in the stable had kicked him. However, Floss considered Jack a potential suspect, as he had a clear motive to harm Dylan. Besides, no one could confirm his alibi. Given the circumstances, the sheriff intends to find Gina and speak with her. Everyone knows she and Dylan had an affair a long time ago. Lenny couldn't process what she had heard. Jack didn't like that they had caught the police's attention. Now the spouses need to take care of each other to get through this. Jack admitted that he recently argued with the owners of the stolen colt that disappeared from the stable. Those people have influential connections, so initially, Jack wasn't bothered by the colt's stolen status. Yesterday they insisted on demanding the money. Jack was so upset that he hit one of the owners in the parking lot. Jack knows this isn't the end. Sooner or later, those guys will come back for the money. Jack doesn't believe his wife, who claims she had no plans with Dylan. Lenny left a message in the online journal, hoping that Gina still checks it. Lenny wants her sister to know about Dylan's demise. Then Lenny went to Georgia Tyler's house, who was deeply grieving for her grandson. After Dylan's parents died, Georgia tried to keep him safe from all the troubles but failed. It was a surprise for Lenny to hear that Dylan had recently taken an interest in horses. She received a call from the father, asking her to come urgently. Jack had been arrested on suspicion of taking Dylan's life. Circumstantial evidence points to him, including ketamine found at the crime scene. Trying to suppress her panic, Lenny told the father they needed a lawyer immediately. But Victor no longer knows what to believe, as he previously saw his daughter stealing ketamine. Lenny was angered by these suspicions. Suddenly Victor received a call from the hospital, saying his daughter Leni had been admitted there. She didn't have any identification on her. But Victor knows that this couldn't be Lenny. Father and daughter picked up Charlie to head to the hospital together. By the way, Charlie is aware that Gina and Dylan dated in high school. Perhaps whoever took Dylan's life also harmed her. By the time all family members arrived at the hospital, Gina was already gone. Apparently, she had pulled the fourth from her arm and escaped. Since Gina couldn't have gone far, they still have a chance to find her. Charlie doesn't understand what his wife is so desperately running from. Lenny was very confused, unable to answer his questions. Now she's just as concerned about her husband's fate. She was allowed to meet him at the police station. Lenny knows Jack is innocent and intends to prove it. But for her plan to work, she needs to know everything he hasn't told her. Their marriage is far from perfect. Lenny often wanted freedom, but now she understands that it doesn't exist. Jack took the wife's hand, saying they were both equally at fault. For him, nothing is more important than family. Together they will get through this. Jack believes they should tell Floss the truth. He accepted the stolen horse, but he didn't harm Dylan. The sheriff was ready to begin questioning. At the same time, Lenny got a call from Gina from Dylan's cell phone. Towers and Payne, the owners of the Colt, took Dylan's life and now they are chasing her. Gina has no one to turn to for help but her sister. In return, she promised to tell the whole truth. The sisters agreed to meet at Georgia Tyler's house. Lenny went there immediately, finding frightened Georgia, who said that two men had broken into the house, but Gina managed to escape. In her attempt to drive the strangers away, Georgia slipped and hit her head. Lenny wanted to call the police but Georgia refused, not wanting to get involved. Lenny received another call from her sister, who wanted to make sure she and Georgia were okay. Gina knows that those people will get what they want, one way or another. Lenny remembered the check for $60,000 and intended to hand it over to Towers and Payne. They met at the arranged place. The men claimed they hadn't seen Jack at the parking lot yesterday. Lenny just wants to end this. $60,000 isn't enough, but she promised to find 15 more soon. Towers and Payne didn't believe her promise, so Lenny began threatening them, saying her husband, who was now under arrest, would tell the police about their stolen stallion. The threat worked, and the men allowed Lenny to leave. She spent the entire evening trying to reach the sister, who wouldn't answer her calls. The sisters share an eerie secret from their past, which they keep to this day. When Lenny noticed a police car following her, she stopped. Floss ordered her to step out of the car. Lenny didn't understand what was happening but had to comply. Floss asked Paula to escort Lenny to their car. She didn't resist, hoping Paula might tell her something. But the deputy sheriff had no right to. Seeing that officers were about to search her car, Lenny became anxious. She was already confused about what had actually happened in the past and what hadn't. Sometimes Lenny couldn't tell herself and her sister apart. Floss ordered Lenny to step out of the car. She was arrested on suspicion of taking the life of Dylan James. Lenny was absolutely shocked to be accused of such a crime. Jack, on the other hand, was released. Leaving the police station, he didn't even look in the wife's direction. Lenny underwent all the required procedures, including fingerprinting. At some point Lenny noticed Gina here, who it turned out was cooperating with the police. She had taken a photo of Lenny handing the check to Towers and Payne. It looked like an attempt to bribe witnesses. There is other evidence too, like the knife found under the seat in Lenny's car. She's hearing about this for the first time. Could the sister really have decided to frame her? The night before, Gina drove injured Dylan away in his pickup, racing at full speed. He begged her to leave without him. Only their mother could tell the sisters apart. When she passed away, something in Lenny seemed to break. Since then, Gina has not seen her sister cry, not even at the mother's funeral. The twins were always very close to each other, but not to Claudia. One day Lenny accidentally pushed Claudia from a great height and asked Gina to switch places with her. This way Gina was blamed for something she didn't do. The girls began switching places for real when they were teenagers. They did it constantly in school. The sisters always shared everything. They even shared Jack. But eventually their paths diverged. Gina felt she wanted to live her own life, not her sister's. And handsome Dylan became a perfect option for her. Dylan told Gina that she was nothing like her twin. They began spending a lot of time together. Gina remembers every day of that summer and fall vividly. Just as clearly as she remembers Halloween night. The young people decided to give in to passion right in the abandoned church, when suddenly they were interrupted by a sharp noise. Before they could understand what was happening, a fire broke out. Police and firefighters arrived at the scene immediately. For some reason Dylan fled, while another person perished. Could it have been Dylan who started the fire? But Gina didn't believe that, because Dylan was constantly with her. So why did he run away? At the time Gina didn't know what Lenny had done. She and Jack were becoming closer. When Lenny married Jack, Gina decided to build her own life and received a scholarship to a university across the country, in California. There, she found freedom and started to lose control. In her second year, she had a nervous breakdown. Charlie became her therapist and helped her understand that she and her sister were two different individuals. Her life slowly began to improve. People were drawn to the tragic story of the twin sisters. Charlie was very proud of his beloved, whose book was published. Both Gina and Lenny were happy in their marriages, and they got pregnant at the same time. This brought the sisters even closer, but Gina's pregnancy ended in a loss. After that, the sister was there for her, promising that they would get through it together. During that time, Gina really needed support. Returning to the hometown was painful for her. Lenny showed the sister her newborn daughter, Maddie. In a way, it was their shared daughter. Gina began noticing that Lenny wasn't paying enough attention to the child. Gina offered to pay for a nanny, but Lenny knew that Jack was too proud to accept help. It seemed Lenny was suffering from postpartum depression. She suggested that her sister switch places again, but Gina didn't think it was a good idea in this situation. However, she decided to stay a few more weeks to help her sister. They both changed their appearance a bit at the same time, so no one would suspect a thing. The same hairstyle? Twins often do that. While Lenny was absorbed in family life, Gina enjoyed meeting readers and other activities. Or was it not Gina at all? Maddie was growing. Jack was the perfect father and husband. Charlie was also consistently wonderful. The sisters switched places every birthday. It became their ritual. Gradually, Lenny began to take control of both lives. Gina didn't like the popularity that came after her book was published. Lenny had a lot to do with that. Lenny also wanted Gina to be a good wife to Charlie. When Gina didn't tell the sister about something, it made her angry, including the fact that Gina started regularly seeing a psychiatrist. Life turned into one big lie, and Gina was tired of it. That's when she started making her own plans. For that, Gina needed cash, which Charlie wouldn't notice was missing. In the husband's safe, Gina found his journal and learned that he had long suspected the sisters were switching places from time to time. And it seemed Charlie didn't mind at all. When Gina asked the husband if he loved her, Charlie assured he did. On the last birthday, the sisters were planning to switch places again. It had been a difficult year. Lenny didn't always know what was going on with Gina, but she looked calm now. Lenny was also glad that the sister had made progress on their new book. Gina returned to the hometown, replacing her sister in the role of mother. One day she saw Dylan James, who was working as a swimming coach. After the daughter's class at the pool, Gina disguised as Lenny approached him. They chatted a little. Dylan shared that he had gotten his life together and was now living with his grandmother. Gina asked Dylan to give her a few private lessons. With money running critically low and the risk of losing the land due to debt, Jack began dealing in illegal activities at the stables, accepting stolen colts for cash. Naturally, the wife didn't approve. But Jack was too proud to take money from Charlie, who had inherited a huge fortune. Gina started taking swimming lessons with Dylan. But he didn't yet realize which sister was in front of him. One evening after another lesson, they were having drinks at a bar. Dylan couldn't understand why Lenny was showing interest in him, as they had never been friends. Gina shared that she was trapped by her own bad decisions. Dylan understood because he too had made many bad choices in life. Gina wanted to be with Dylan, but he couldn't. Once Lenny had ruined his relationship with Gina. The day after the fire, Lenny advised Dylan to flee, saying the police suspected him and Gina. Since then, his life had gone downhill. Perhaps Lenny did this because she envied Dylan's love for her sister and wanted him gone. Gina didn't know these details. When Dylan, after paying for their drinks, left the bar, Gina followed him and confessed who she really was. Gina shared details that only the two of them could know. Their feelings reignited. Dylan realized it truly was Gina in front of him. With Dylan, she felt really happy. Gina no longer wanted to live both false lives, she wanted to live her own. At home, family was always waiting for Gina. Claudia noticed that her sister had taken an interest in diving, something she had never shown before. Dylan and Gina planned to run away together and start fresh. When Meg found out about the affair between her friend and cousin, she wasn't pleased. The woman Meg thought was Lenny said it was nobody's business but their own. But Meg still remembered how Lenny's family had cast Dylan out after the fire and didn't want history to repeat itself. Knowing Meg was also having an affair, Gina had to resort to blackmail. Soon Gina found out she was pregnant. Dylan was thrilled. Gina was sure he was the father. They loved each other, and nothing else mattered. Gina also loved Maddie and Jack as family, but living a lie wasn't a solution. They needed to escape before her pregnancy became obvious, but it would require a lot of money. Gina had an idea and staged a robbery at the stables, followed by her disappearance. This way her sister would get to live both lives. However, Things didn't go as planned when Lenny arrived and tried to mislead Dylan. Georgia was the only one Gina could turn to for help. That's how she was able to reunite with Dylan. The problem was that Lenny had stolen their passports and tickets. But this didn't lessen the lovers' determination to leave without looking back. Gina was going to attend the birthday party to say goodbye to everyone, especially Maddie. Dylan didn't show up on time at the designated place, his grandmother's house. Georgia reminded Gina that she herself had changed the plan and promised to wait for Dylan in the cabin in the woods. Realizing Lenny had deceived Dylan, Gina rushed there and found her lover with fatal injuries. She helped Dylan reach the pickup, intending to take him to the hospital. Barely remaining conscious, Dylan begged his beloved to leave without him. To save her time, Dylan ensured his life ended right then and there. Gina cried in despair. After saying goodbye to her love, she set the car on fire. There was no other choice. Some time later, Gina regained consciousness in the hospital. Sadly, she had lost the baby. At first, the medical staff mistook her for Lenny and contacted her relatives. Learning that her family was on their way, Gina fled the hospital. Later, from Georgia's house, Gina called her sister, lying that she was being hunted by the Colt's owners. This scene was staged by Gina and Georgia to lure Lenny into a trap. That's how she ended up in jail. Floss interrogated Lenny, who claimed that the mentally unstable sister had framed her. However, the sheriff didn't consider this enough of a motive. Lenny continued to insist that her sister knew more than she was letting on. After the interrogation, Floss arrested Gina on suspicion of Robert Crackhan's demise in the fire at the abandoned church 25 years ago. It was Gina's turn for questioning, and she claimed that Lenny, not she, had the romance with Dylan, except for their high school years. Gina also denied starting the fire. Shortly before the incident, she had been at a Halloween party and then went with Dylan to the abandoned church. Perhaps the sister was jealous of her. Whatever the case, someone started the fire. Noticing a man on the second floor, Dylan told Gina to run, and he stayed behind to try to save the man. Gina was very worried about her lover. Lenny, who supposedly hadn't left the party, suggested they swap places immediately, saying the police would suspect anyone who had been at the church during the fire. This was just feigned concern. In the present, Detective Floss didn't believe Gina's claim that Lenny had set the fire. The only person who could confirm or deny it was already dead. Floss realized that the sisters regularly deceived those around them for their own benefit. Gina assured that they only did it when they were teenagers and mentioned the $60,000 check drawn from her account, which had somehow ended up with Lenny. The sheriff immediately called a bank employee about this issue and learned there had been some confusion over the missing ID. And Dylan surprisingly was at the center of it. Lenny claimed she received the check from her sister as financial assistance. She denied any romantic relationship with Dylan. Victor was allowed to meet with one of his daughters, Lenny. She said her sister wanted to fool everyone. Currently, the police believe Gina had set the church fire, while Lenny was suspected of taking Dylan's life. Victor couldn't believe this was happening to his family. But he would love the daughters regardless. Lenny promised to make things right. Paula informed Floss that they had received the forensic results, which showed that fingerprints of Dylan and Gina, but not Lenny, were all over the cabin in the woods. This contradicted everything Floss knew. She ordered Paula to finish reviewing the security camera footage. The sheriff directly asked Lenny if they had shared Dylan. The sisters usually did everything together, but it seemed Dylan was the one thing Gina wasn't willing to share. Envy and a quarrel over an old love sounded like a sufficient motive. Paula managed to find something interesting in the surveillance footage. Floss knew that the sisters had been swapping identities all their lives, deceiving those around them. But when it came to the emotional side of things, events always pointed to Gina. This was how, according to Victor, the mother could tell the sisters apart. Floss showed Gina a surveillance tape from the hospital, where an unidentified woman who had lost her unborn baby had been admitted. At first, the nursing staff mistook her for Lenny. It was obvious Dylan was the father. But if Gina had only arrived in town a few days ago, when could she have gotten pregnant? Now the sheriff wanted Gina to tell the whole truth. Gina revealed that every year on their birthday, she and Lenny would switch lives. The sheriff was confused by the testimony. Suddenly, the woman under arrest began braiding her hair, just as Lenny usually did, and urged Floss not to believe a word Gina said, claiming she was simply crazy and used to manipulating people. Then the woman let her hair down again, as Gina normally wore it. This little performance confirmed that the sisters had become so skilled in taking on each other's roles that deceiving others was second nature. Therefore, Floss couldn't say for sure who was on the video, who set the fire, who pushed Claudia, and who was responsible for Dylan's demise. Of course, the sheriff could charge Gina with identity theft and bank fraud. However, Gina herself no longer knew who she was. The sheriff was forced to release the sisters for now, as she couldn't press charges without knowing who exactly was responsible. This applied to Dylan's demise and the fire. The sisters would be released on the condition that they surrender their passports and don't leave town. Floss promised she would make sure they both ended up in jail. Victor was utterly confused. Gina asked Charlie why he had played along all these years. Charlie said that as a psychiatrist, he had quickly figured out the yearly switch. And he was willing to love both sisters. Gina didn't want to hurt Charlie, but her feelings for Dylan were too strong. The past couldn't be changed, so all they could do now was simply forgive each other. Jack no longer wanted to see Lenny in their house. The news that the sisters had been swapping lives every year broke him. Lenny had betrayed everything they had. Jack made it clear to the woman he thought was his wife that there was no longer a place for her in his life or their daughter's life. Claudia wasn't surprised when she learned Gina had wanted to leave the whole family behind for Dylan. Claudia had always had a bad opinion of this sister. Gina was ready to admit she had made many mistakes, but she had her reasons. Claudia was shocked to discover that she became disabled not because of Gina but because of Lenny. At the time, Gina didn't understand what was happening and thought the sister wanted to protect her by offering to temporarily switch places. And this lie has been following them ever since. It no longer matters who exactly pushed Claudia. Now that the truth about the sisters' deceit has come out, nothing will ever be the same again. Gina met Paula again in a cafe, assuring her that she wasn't involved in the fire or Dylan's demise. Paula wanted to believe Gina but didn't know how to help her. After receiving a call from her father, Gina rushed to the house. She found him on the floor, semi-conscious. Victor didn't want his daughter to call an ambulance. He regretted now that Gina and Lenny had seen their mother dying. Perhaps it had damaged their minds. He should have done something. Victor passed away right in the daughter's arms. Gina cried in helplessness. Lenny arrived and understood what had happened just from Gina's expression. Once Gina, Lenny, Claudia and their parents had been a happy family. But at some point everything fell apart. Lenny was hurt that their father was gone, especially because she didn't even get a chance to say goodbye. Lenny suggested coming up with a story for the police so another death wouldn't look suspicious. Pointing a gun at her sister, Gina declared she no longer wanted to be part of her plans. She also believed the sister was responsible for Dylan's demise. At first Lenny denied it, but then she said she had acted in self-defense. Suddenly Lenny attacked Gina, knocking the gun out of her hands. A fight broke out between the sisters, during which flames from the fireplace spread through the house. Gina wanted to pull the father's body out, but Lenny had other plans. She loved her sister more than life itself and wouldn't let them be apart. The flames spread rapidly. Gina rushed to the second floor. With an axe in hand, Lenny followed. The bathroom door was locked, and Gina broke it down. Seeing the filled bathtub triggered painful memories for her. Meanwhile, Gina tried to escape through the window but in vain. Lenny began breaking down the door to their old room. In the past, after seeing her sister and Dylan lost in passion at the abandoned church, Lenny, who had secretly left the Halloween party, set the fire. But Lenny hadn't immediately noticed the vagrant on the upper floor. In the present, Lenny entered the room, still searching for Gina, who had managed to escape onto the roof. Lenny ran out of the burning house. The past intertwined with the present. Lenny saw her sister riding off on a horse. Jack tried to find out from his wife what had happened, but she ran off without an explanation. Jack immediately called the fire department. Lenny chased her sister into the woods. Gina jumped off the horse and twisted her ankle, but kept running. Firefighters were putting out the flames. Jack told the sheriff he hadn't been able to get inside the house and didn't know where Victor was. He'd only seen the sisters ride off into the forest. Meanwhile, Gina kept running from the sister, who was trying to convince her they could go back to their old lives or start fresh somewhere new. Gina snuck up behind Lenny and knocked her out. The sisters used to be inseparable, believing themselves to be one whole. In the present, Lenny regained consciousness in the forest while Gina, limping, made her way toward the fast mountain river. Suddenly she heard Lenny's voice as she appeared on the riverbank, urging her sister to come back home. Right in the river, Lenny attacked Gina, and a fight broke out between them again, during which they ended up on the edge of a waterfall. Long ago, Lenny woke to the sounds of splashing water and went toward the bathroom to check what was happening. There, the girl saw her father holding their terminally ill mother underwater in the bathtub. He did it to release her from her suffering. In fear, the girl hurried back to bed. Since then, a part of her emotions was lost. The father entered the daughter's room, thinking Gina had been awake. In the present, she didn't want to believe it, but the father's final words confirmed Lenny's story. In Lenny's opinion, their parents had planned it in advance. Their mother wanted to leave before the illness completely consumed her. Both sisters were confused about what was truth and what was lies. All these years, Victor had thought it was Gina who had seen them, not Lenny, which is why she became the family outcast for so long. Now Lenny begged the sister to come back to her so they could be together forever. But Gina had already made her decision and stepped off the waterfall's edge. By this point the fire was extinguished. Among the ashes, the sheriff found one of the sisters' bracelets. They had worn matching bracelets as children. Late at night, the search party found Lenny in the woods. She recounted how her sister had jumped off the waterfall's edge. Evidently the sheriff didn't believe her, as not a word could be verified. For now Lenny settled into the hotel. Charlie arrived, not believing Gina would harm herself intentionally. Through tears, Lenny said her sister had been so broken that no love could heal her. Both Lenny and Charlie hoped Gina was alive and happy somewhere, even if it was without them. But regardless, without a proper goodbye, they wouldn't be able to truly move on. All these years Charlie had known about the sisters swapping places but hadn't revealed it, simply watching. He loved them both. But now the time had come to leave for good. At the police station, Floss asked Paula to find all the files on the church fire case in the archives. Slowly but surely, Floss was beginning to piece things together. They needed to stop thinking of the sisters as two separate people. Anything Gina did, Lenny could have done too. Now Floss wanted to find evidence proving that Lenny had entered the church and started the fire. Paula spent a long time searching through the archives for the case materials. And she managed to find a crucial piece of evidence, a pair of earrings. Lenny hired a lawyer, who thought that the fact that the sisters had deceived everyone all their lives by switching places every year would be poorly received in court. Even if they hadn't gained any criminal advantage from it, it was at the very least immoral. However, if people went to jail for immorality, no one would be left free. Right now Lenny is only concerned that Jack might forbid her from seeing the daughter. Lenny was released until the trial. The townspeople are doing nothing but gossiping about her. Paula doesn't know why, but she feels like she's talking to Gina, not Lenny. Paula doesn't think of the sisters as bad, life has simply been unfair to them. Upon learning that Floss was looking for evidence connecting her to the church fire, Lenny grew nervous. Since Lenny's family was the only one kind to her after she moved here, Paula wanted to help and handed over the evidence to her. It turned out to be a trap planned by the sheriff. The police watched as Lenny threw the evidence in a trash can. Then she went to the school to see her daughter. Maddie told her mother that her father had forbidden them to speak. Lenny only needed a few minutes to tell the daughter how much she loved her. Now Lenny has to leave, and she hopes that Maddie will forgive her one day. The police arrived at the family home, but Jack assured that Lenny no longer lived here. The police had already checked every hotel in town, but she wasn't there either. Meanwhile, Lenny arrived at the airport, providing the fake passport under the name Kira Davis. She was going to go to Australia. Due to technical issues, the check-in process slowed down, but overall things went smoothly. Suddenly an airport staff member mentioned that she had seen a very similar passenger yesterday, who was flying to Kansas. Lenny realized her sister might be alive and on the run as well. Floss received an anonymous envelope with a flash drive containing the sisters' electronic journal. Charlie wrote a book about the twins' story, which became a bestseller. At a book presentation, one of the audience members asked if Gina's body had ever been found. Charlie replied that it hadn't. For a moment, he thought he saw his wife among the audience. That evening Gina, or maybe Lenny, really did come to his house. Charlie had never changed the locks. The woman claimed she hadn't been at the book presentation today. Charlie still didn't know who was standing before him, Gina or Lenny. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.